Can design create a safe, healthy and inclusive habitat for humans and other living species? And if so, which design strategies are capable of providing answers to urgencies in society? My name is Teun van den Ende. I wish everyone who is watching at home to this talk show a warm welcome from the studio here in the heart of the Rotterdam Architecture Month in the Kruisplein Garage. And today I'll be talking to 6 young and talented design professionals who will be sharing their views on how to shape the future. They all recently graduated from different Dutch universities and architecture schools. And the reason they're with us today is because they have all been nominated for the Architectuur Netherlands, which means that they represent the current generation of design talent in architecture, urbanism, interior, and landscape architecture. And in a moment or two, we'll be talking about them with their visions that range from architectural proposals for neighborhood renewal to large-scale landscape strategies. But first, we'll start with a brief introduction, for which I'm joined by Barbara Luns, Director of AIR Rotterdam, and Henk van der Veen, Director of Architectuur, who's in charge of showcasing the best graduation projects in architecture, urbanism, interior, and landscape. Warm welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, Barbara, why is it so important that we actually look into this young generation of talent during the Rotterdam Architecture Month?
Because what we hope to do with the Architectural Month is to also get the architectural climate in the city to make it stronger. And I think the younger generation and the new generation of architects is a really important part of this architectural climate. They will become part of the office or the professional climate soon enough, and I think we need their ideas, their intentions, the way they view their view on the world. We needed to get these bigger transitions that we are facing as a city and as a country. And as a society in general, we needed to make them think along. Yeah. And I think what is nice on the Architectural Month, what we try to do is we already have a lot of festivities in the city. We are Rotterdam architectural city, but we try to make it to get this professional part of the architectural profession to join in with these festivities, so that you can have a combination between enjoying yourself and enjoying the architecture, but also learning more about it. Yeah,
so the young generation might also provide challenging perspectives for people that might have been working in the field for a longer period.
Yeah, exactly. I really, I have a lot of hope on this new generation, but it's also, I think a lot of things are changing also in our profession, and I think we need this new generation also to look at it with a fresh perspective. I think it's very important that they don't have the ballast of change, so they don't see that it's a different way of working. It's just their way of working, and how they can provide us with a new perspective on how our profession, what we need to do, and what the urgencies are there for to be challenged.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, maybe we should actually explain what Architectuur is. And luckily, Henk is the most enlightened person on the planet concerning Architectuur. So, Henk, could you please enlighten us? What is Architectuur, and could you also maybe give us an example of a former winner?
Yeah, I'm glad to do that, of course. Well, in fact, Architectuur is a cooperation between all the Dutch schools teaching spatial design, technical universities, the University in Wageningen for landscape architecture, and the technical universities in Delft-Eindhoven. And recently also the interior design schools have joined as an experiment. Lately they became also recognized as master courses, so they are also in the package.
Great.
And Archipre organizes 2 competitions, you might say, or 2 types of presentations. The one we are dealing with here and now is the Archipre Netherlands, but we also organize the Archipre International. It's a worldwide initiative, and everyone sees the first slide, but I didn't notice it yet.
That's the numbers, and you're the person coordinating mostly all of the, together with Max Rink, all of the programs that Archipre is organizing.
Exactly.
And what is the main goal of those exhibitions, the publications? And
Yeah, well, the formula is very simple, in fact, because what we do is we ask the schools to select their best graduation projects. And we think that because the spatial disciplines are difficult disciplines, I mean, when you're graduated, you have to learn the rest of your life to become a real big name or a big... so it is important in our regard that people who are talented, that they are able to enter the academic field or the professional field as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So that's in fact what we are doing. I think that the selection by the schools is very based on the content of their projects. Yeah. So we present the real talents graduating on these schools in the Netherlands, but also worldwide.
Yeah. But if you look at how the selection is made, these universities and architecture schools are allowed to submit different graduation projects, different promising designers, and then how does it move forward towards a selection for Archipre?
Yeah, but well, they make a selection. The big schools can select more projects than the smaller ones, and what we do is we ask an independent jury to review those projects, and that's also some kind of a comment back to the schools. Yeah. The selection in the schools is a very important in the schools, and then they discuss, of course, the quality of their education, and the reflection of the jury plays a role in the next year. It is mostly combined with an exhibition. Yeah. So there, in fact, it already starts. Yeah. And what we do is we present it on our website, in a book, and in exhibitions, because we think it's very valuable that as many people learn to know these projects as possible. Yeah. And in our history, we noticed that it really contributes in several ways to the discussion and also the real quality of design, and also in the concrete practice.
Yeah, yeah. So we asked you to select one of the examples, through which you can actually show that the talent that comes through Archipre actually manages to go into the building practice and realize projects. What kind of projects did you bring with you?
Yeah, it is really the start of Archipre, and if you can show me the next slide, then you see here a project in Rotterdam, of course. We could have chosen any city, but Rotterdam, of course, in this context. And the beginning of Archipre was the notion that in times when the building up of the country was still at hand after the war, that a lot of crap was being built, you might say. And there was in Delft, or I think in all the schools, they were teaching housing, public housing, etc. And people saw that there were very intriguing and much better ideas in the graduation project and the study project than
The actual architects
the actual
that were making the housing.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
So, and that was in the beginning of the 80s. First Architectuur was 1980. And then we saw a number of participants of Architectuur entering the practice with really spectacular good projects.
Yeah.
Presenting new typologies, very contextual, amazing examples also for other initiatives throughout the country. And the one you just saw was a project made by DKV. Dolf Dobbelaar and Paul de Vroom were winners of the Architectuur, I think in 1982 or something, and they built that project halfway the 80s. But there are more examples like, immediately after their study, Mikano won the Kruisplein contest.
Social housing.
Also social housing.
Yeah.
So that notion that you can contribute to the reality of building, but also the notion that there is a lot of knowledge in the designers we present that can be very helpful to develop a better future for all of us. Huh?
Great.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks for enlightening us. And I was just curious, when you were studying, Barbara, what kind of status did Architectuur have? Can you tell me?
I think it has a very steady status, I think. So everybody hangs up their posters every year, all the graduates. So yeah, at the academy it was...
You studied in Rotterdam?
In Rotterdam, everybody joined. And I can also remember it from Delft. It was also every year quite a big exhibition.
Sure.
In which they chose the candidates. So I think it still has a lot of status. I think it's also important for them to realize, and also it's the step they're gonna make into this practice. So yeah. Everybody's looking forward, of course, to show what they can do and how they are thinking about.
Great. One last question. What struck you about this year's projects?
I think this year we have a very special edition in terms of diversity, because Architectuur is just not about one theme or whatever. You see what is the best that comes from the schools. And this year we saw a lot of projects on a bigger scale, landscape and also urban design, crossovers like the urban design project of Laura.
Okay.
That we will see.
We will go into the proposals and the projects later. So I'm going to stop you here.
Very good.
What is most important, I think, to realize is that the graduation projects are a way of introducing also yourself towards a field, a large field with a lot of competitors. And Architectuur is definitely gives a lot of meaning to that specific designer when he enters that field and maybe is looking for a job and wants to enter.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that every student realizes that the graduation project is the first step into their career. It is always something that you present to your client, your...
Great. So, thank you, Henk and Barbara. Now it's time to actually kick off with the first conversation with the Architectuur designers themselves. And Henk will stay with me during the 3 conversations as a co-host, and I will introduce the 6 designers to you in each conversation separately. In the coming hour, we'll be learning how to stimulate an inclusive society, and also how to enhance ecosystems by design. But first of all, we will delve into 2 designs that take action against the current climate crisis. Okay, climate action. We are joined by Nicole Garcia Vocht through Zoom. She could not make it to Rotterdam. And next to me, Freek van Riet, who both graduated on a design that has made the climate problem even more urgent, but at the same time has thought about strategies of maybe mitigating or even reducing the impact of climate change. Because we have limited time, I would like to immediately go to Nicole, who has prepared a small presentation, very brief, only a couple of minutes. After her, Freek will continue, and then we will go into dialogue together. So first of all, welcome, Nicole.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Well, you can actually start sharing your screen if you're ready.
Yes. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, and it's not yet full screen, but yeah, now it is.
Now.
Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to talk about my graduation project at TU Delft, which is called Synchronizing Habitat Risk Adaptation by Co-Evolution of Environment and Society. And well, I started this thesis with a reflection on the current crises, which, because it was also actually developed in one, the pandemic was, during this time, it was actually necessary to get accustomed to extraordinary conditions in order to survive this crisis. And it was this aspect that, this ability to adapt, that actually inspired my graduation project. To me, adaptation is striving for improvement, is by making changes in an evolving cycle, leading to transformations that consider the new conditions and reconnect to the context. So in terms of climate change, this means learn how to live with environmental risks. And well, I concentrated on an area very well known, the Wadden Sea region, which is a beautiful, unique landscape, intertidal landscape. And well, although we're not certain what will happen in 2100 with climate change, we are actually certain of 3 things. The first would be the conflicting demand of developments between the sea and the coast, such as port expansions and more conservation areas, which are actually jeopardizing the connectivity between different ecosystems, which also implies that policies are not following in a holistic perspective, but more of an individual one. We can also say that sea temperature rise, will attract invasive species, which will make the habitat deplete, which is a phenomenon that is actually very supported by this linear economic model we're currently on in these heavily industrialized deltas. In the case of the Wadden Sea, it was 3 industrialized deltas, which is affecting the value of health. And a third value I decided to concentrate was, of course, safety, which involves the problem of inundation, which is inundation will cover and drown habitats, will move large amounts of sediments, and due to eroding coastlines and heavy protection infrastructure. And an interesting area for me to explore this was the Weser estuary in Lower Saxony, Germany, which is one of the areas most exposed to this. Well, I won't delve much into this, which is the solution I brought. The idea was at first to that the intensity of a given hazard would be gradually diminished by a different set of existing and non-existing infrastructures, which can be summarized in these 3 strategies, which are the barrier island strategy, the absorptive edge strategy, and socio-ecological corridor strategy at land. So this means that we can embrace the risk by welcoming these natural processes. In the case of my project, it was 9 processes. And well, the design I was inspired actually by trying to engage the living system into the design of their environment. And in order to support this, I wanted to create habitats, which in a place can become a habitat only if it is an ecosystem. And for this, I developed an ecosystem approach, an ecosystem assessment approach, a more holistic one, to explore an ecosystem succession approach to the project. And I tested this in these 2 areas, which one of them was in the water and another one was on the coast. I will show you, because of time, just the one on the water. The idea was that the gradual formation of these islands and the absorptive edge, for example, is meant to support different vulnerable elements, biotic and abiotic elements, by the creation of different relationships over time. And as you can see, for example, the relationship between 2 different creating ecotones was very important. In order to trigger these relationships, 3 key projects were necessary. Here I'm showing just one, which was the breaking waters. So just to show you what I mean, well, the 3 projects were the breaking waters, the productive mudflats, and a barrier island in the case of the water. And the same principles were applied again in the coast, in a more heavy structured landscape. And this heavy, also creating these different relationships over time to make these more dynamic infrastructures.
Nicole, I'd
yes.
sort of like to stop you there.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you very much.
I just wanted to leave you the video, yes.
This is the final video. So that yes. Actually shows the concrete measures you are going to take to actually achieve the synchronization of these habitats.
Yes, exactly.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you. Well, we'll come back to you. First of all, Freek van Riet, also welcome. You didn't maybe go so far out from the Netherlands, but you did cover most of the country with your graduation project. Can you also show us maybe some short images?
Yeah, sure, and thanks for the invitation.
You're welcome.
High tide, it's how we can anticipate the pressing consequences of climate crisis in urban development. It started actually with my fascination. It always has been with the water and how we can try to control and play with it. However, I find it astonishing to see in the current climate crisis that the pattern of urbanization is actually paying little attention to this. While we precisely now that the decisions are being made for the next generations. And sea level rise is inevitable. However, we cannot wait for certainty, and we will have to start anticipating the uncertain future now. So the question is, which choices do we have to make now, and which choices can we make still in the future? And by looking into the past, we can learn a few lessons. Look 100 years back. For instance, the analysis of history of the Delta works shows that the large-scale public works take time. Time to come at an integral intervention of, from the complexity of the assignment, time to carefully consider all the interests, and above all, time to achieve cultural awareness and acceptance. It took us 43 years to actually build the Delta Works. And for 4 characteristic landscapes in the Netherlands, one perspective I developed and illustrated on a specific place. And the 4 strategies show the task of flood risk management, but also lead to new spatial typologies. So the first one, the strategy attack, I did it at the Dutch coast, Scheveningen, with new islands in sea. Strategy 2 is about protect. It's at Krimpen aan de Lek with a big dike. Strategy 3 is about retreat with new urban development at the higher grounds of the Veluwe. And strategy 4 is connect, the connection between Rotterdam and Arnhem with elevated highways. So altogether, these perspectives, they offer a new way of long-term vision for the Netherlands. So that's
great.
What it is.
Yeah. And it's not a choice of which we should use. It's maybe a mix.
Yeah, and it really depends on the location and the landscape you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So it's not overall for the whole Netherlands.
Okay. Yeah. Well, maybe first of all, because they are so clear, your 4 categories: attack, protect, retreat, connect. I'd like to go to Nicole and ask her if her project, which one of these 4 categories might we use to actually, typify your project, because you're using the verb synchronization. When you hear Freek tell his story, which one of those 4 terms would you actually choose?
In the project, I also developed sort of the same categories. I looked upon them and chose one, and it's very curious that we have similar categorization. And I chose what I call the Eco-Pragmatic Scenario, which I believe it would be the connect strategy. So I believe you also propose sort of islands and a more soft edge to withstand the sea level rise in the coast, right?
Yeah.
Would it be fair to say that both of your projects are using the common phrase of building with nature?
Yes.
Or building against nature in some aspects?
It's. I first actually started with the philosophy that we should really work with nature. I still believe it's the way we should do it. But to do research, I wanted to test all of these strategies, and it really depends on what I said of the location. So I first didn't want to do the attack of the new Dutch coast because I thought it's ridiculous. But I thought I should do the research first to see if it's really ridiculous or not.
Okay.
So that's why I did.
Falsify it. In a way. Yeah. So what strikes me is that you both have, you were educated in academy, the school in Amsterdam.
In Rotterdam.
Sorry, in Rotterdam. Yeah. And Nicole, you were educated in Delft.
Yes.
And there is a sort of research-oriented approach in both of your projects. You're very investigative in your way. But what strikes me in the images is that, Freek, you have quite radical proposals, especially the highway, which you say is a connection.
Yeah.
And Nicole identifies also with the same word, connecting, but has been showing totally different images. Maybe you can reflect on that, both of you.
Maybe Nicole. Yeah.
Well,
Nicole?
I guess it is how you interpret the value. For me, it was very. This word "connect" was very attached to connecting systems. So that something works as a system. I guess if you would take the word literally, it would be connecting with highways, with the same strategies that, you were telling. Yeah.
And I think it's the way how you show things. It's something as designers we have the ability to show how it can be. And what I try to do is because it's a kind of an abstract thing, climate change, it's something far away in the future. So to make it visible, I found it interesting to make perspectives on eye-level perspectives. And although they're not really detailed, that's something I try to stay away from. You should really show what are the possibilities for the future and think about the next generations.
Do you have the feeling that clients at the moment are aware enough of the urgency of climate action that should be taken?
I found it quite often that it's something they add at the end. So
it's not an integral part of the brief. Maybe
there's still a lot to be gained, but yeah, it's getting better.
Yeah.
But we should emphasize it in each project. So it's still something they add, and but it's slowly started to get better, and we should repeat it. I think all the time that it's important. Yeah.
And this long-term approach, you mentioned the Delta Works, 43 years in the making. Nicole, your project focuses on the Wadden area. That's also an ecosystem that has been changing over time. What kind of time frame did you have in mind?
Well, my project is a long-term project, so it has like strategies that are to be implemented right away, these pilots that should be experimented on, and then there is a common objective, which is long-term, and this spans till 2100. So it's a very long span where most of the things are changing constantly. So these pilot projects within time are key for the proposal to work.
Yeah. Okay. Briefly, just a short question towards Henk, because in educational programs, all the architecture schools, climate is undoubtedly one of the themes, but has it already been a big theme in last, let's say, 5 years of Archipri, or is it now suddenly?
Yeah, well, it has been a theme, and in several ways, but in this edition it's very prominent. That's also very good, and what is also very nice is that it takes different shapes, you know? I mean, Nicole shows very the relation between the forces that are needed to battle and to improve also the surroundings in these working of the elements, but also the use of the land by people and by transport, and so I think that's a very intriguing way to deal with it. And I was also curious, Nicole, you studied urban planning, but there is also a lot of landscape design in your project. How did you involve that, or how were you guided on that?
Well, I actually think that urbanism and landscape are hard to separate in these days. If you deal with climate, it is very hard to look for like a line between those two professions. And that's why I chose a project that yes, you could see it in a landscape architecture masters, but I try to. I think working with systems is universal. So for urbanists and for landscape architects, it applies the same thing. The same. That's how I saw it. But the curious thing is that I actually end up working in a landscape office. So I guess.
Where are you working now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Which
Where?
office?
Oh, in an office in Germany called Studio Grüngau. Yeah.
Okay. Well, congratulations then. It's always nice to hear that you find your way in a professional practice now. Thank you so much, and also thank you, Freek. We're going to move on to the second discussion, designing for inclusivity. Designing for inclusivity. It's actually quite a debated subject because multiple attitudes exist towards inclusive design. What is actually an inclusive design strategy and how should it concern existing inhabitants of cities? We'll be going to talk about this with our two guests now at the table. It's Job van de Heuvel,
yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
And Antonio Pauletti.
Thank you.
We'll go on to you in a short notice. First of all, we're going to kick off with Job. Your project is called We Grow Co.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Would you like to tell us in a couple of slides?
Yes, I can start right away. We Grow Co is an urban strategy for organic co-creation of neighborhoods, and it is based on the open building legacy. We Grow Co explores how the new neighborhood of Strandeiland in Amsterdam can be organically grown from an ecological and social perspective, bio-based and inclusive. And from an ecological perspective, We Grow Co explores if industrial hemp can be grown locally to create bio-based building materials and eventually create an open and adaptable neighborhood together with inhabitants. Well, the strategy is divided in 5 consecutive phases. In phase 1, flexible margins and zones are created to make an adaptable urban underlayer for the neighborhood. In phase 2, a bio-based production line is created to plant and harvest hemp and make building materials in hemp facilities. Then in phase 3, the construction of the hemp facilities adapt to open structures which facilitate stairs and circulation for the future dwellings and buildings. In phase 4, urban tissue is designed with the inhabitants. And phase 5, the architects and inhabitants design the open buildings together. And in this design process, there is a differentiation between the drager and the inbouw. We Grow Co is a manifest for growing and harvesting building materials, food, energy and water as locally as possible together with inhabitants. The hemp production creates fertile topsoil so other plant species can grow when the production process is completed. In this way, a green neighborhood can be created. And then, from a social perspective, We Grow Co explores how to create an inclusive neighborhood by means of the open building legacy. An open building neighborhood is a neighborhood which is adaptable for co-creation, and by providing opportunities for inhabitants to choose their own infill of shared spaces and also the size and layout of dwellings and facades. It explores the potential of the in-between space to stimulate social interaction. And what's most important is that the design of this urban tissue is open for inhabitants to create a gradient between the private and the public spaces in such a way that people get the opportunity to adapt a space to their needs, hopefully creating responsibility for the neighbors and neighborhood. And the design of the open buildings contains out of 2 parts. One is the drager, or this fixed the structure, and this is designed to maintain for hundreds of years. And then secondly, it consists out of the inbouw, or the infill dwellings, which are completely flexible and can be changed over time by users. In this way, we can create buildings in which all kinds of people can live next to each other. Thousands of housing options are possible because of this open building. And then to conclude, We Grow Co gives the opportunity for inhabitants to create self-sufficient spaces which are adapted by the people themselves and can be changed over time. At the same time, it gives the opportunity to people to create socially inclusive spaces which are open to be adapted to the needs of people, hopefully stimulating social interaction and creating a feeling of responsibility for the environment and their neighbors.
Wonderful, yeah. It's not only about inclusivity, but it's also about creating green and climate neutral.
Yes.
So we're sort of linking back to the last theme a little bit.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Would you like to continue? Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for having me here. I'm very happy to be part of this talk. I will just lead you briefly through my thesis theme, that is called Architecture in Motion, Reconfiguring Addis Ababa's Narratives. And the setting of the graduation is Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. That is at the same time one of the fastest growing economies and one of the poorest countries in the world. As its population is growing exorbitantly, waves of migrants are flowing endlessly into the city, and Addis Ababa needs to deliver quickly in great quantities and as cheap as possible. It seems that there is no time for thinking. Such a forced march to development often translates into upgrading the city through evictions and demolitions of entire neighborhood and an imposition of a standardized notion of modernity. Similar informal settlements, as Tali and Sefer, a district in the heart of the city, will be soon replaced by a luxurious CBD. And alongside losing this tangible heritage comprised of streets, alleyways, and historical architecture, Addis would erase human narratives molded through the structure of the longue durée, risking to miss its last chance to retain its cultural identity and build an inclusive city. It's clear that we have reached a point in which a radical intervention in similar districts is inevitable to cope with such a fast pace of development. Yet, there are two ways to do so. We could sweep away these districts that are considered as slum and impose a development, or we could try to learn from its history and from how the informal city came about and propose a redevelopment in continuity with the past and that's not harm the livelihood of the community. Indeed, the project aims to densify and reconfigure the old city without erasing its traces, interpreting its styles of life, and providing a dynamic framework from which the settlement can grow organically through time. By decoding decentralized morphogenic processes and learning from self-organizing systems, this intervention proposes a model to design modern neighborhoods in the global south.
Thank you very much. What strikes me about both of your projects is that I think there is a period in which the project should grow. If I
absolutely.
Correctly? Yeah,
definitely.
But the big difference is, in terms of presentation, how you present, Antonio, is about the existing urban fabric and existing inhabitants. And Joop, your project focuses on a position somewhere in the country, but it could be anywhere, if that's correct?
It could be anywhere. In this case, I focused on the new island of Strandeiland in Amsterdam, which is not there yet, actually.
Okay.
But it could be anywhere, actually. This is a strategy which can be applied on multiple occasions. Yes.
And your strategy is to build with, well, let's say, eco-friendly materials, but also to make use of methods to generate energy, to generate clean water, etc.
Well, in general, it starts with this, to make as much use of natural materials, which you can grow yourself, of course. And in reality, of course, then it stops somewhere that you need solar power, for example, to use. Okay. But the approach is to use as much as grown materials as possible. Yeah.
And what about the materials that you would like to propose in Addis Ababa? Would you also like to grow and source the materials locally?
No, absolutely. I think that this theme is also a part of my research. Yeah. Let's say my approach in general, I would say I try to look at as much as possible local resources in terms of history, in terms of learning from the spatial agency of a dweller, so how the city came about, but also learning of how we can propose some other material indeed in the construction. So indeed, at the moment, Addis Ababa is being constructed in concrete mainly. So it's a foreign material, mainly coming from China, and the workers are generally specialized workers. So this does not bring any, let's say, economic opportunity to locals. So I think social and economic and environmental problems are in this project coming all together, because I'm proposing a method that it's compressed earth blocks, so that can be, again, locally sourced, and timber, which is a material that exists in Addis Ababa and also in the built environment there, and it's also about let's say, traditional building techniques.
Yeah, and then I think one of the main questions might be when we are building these neighborhoods, if we do not no longer use concrete or steel or any other materials that are depleting, raw material. Can we actually realize large-scale neighborhoods and also realize high-rises?
I think so.
Yeah?
Yeah, I think because now you see major developments also for wooden buildings and really using building materials which are not that depleted and will grow back again. And in my project, for example, I used a wooden structure, drager, with this hemp, this industrial hemp, as a material which can change. So this drager will stay for a lot of time, while this hemp can be replaced and rechanged every time when the generation changes. So that's how I did it in my project. But I think it's really a possibility for now and in the future. Yeah.
Okay. And if the local workers were to build, what kind of building height or density do you imagine they could realize?
Yeah, let's say that the model in general, it's very much radical in this sense.
Okay.
But I would say that, yeah, indeed, sustainability is very much related to a context. No? So in a place where there's an abundance of timber represents a local resource. In Addis Ababa, earth can represent, of course, a big resource. And you were questioning high-rise, it's really important, because if you're building with earth, you're not using steel and everything, it's important. But if we look, for example, in Yemen, Shibam, or some other settlements there are 8, 10-story buildings made with rammed earth. Of course, the walls are 1 or 2 meters big, but it's something that it's happening and historically it exists. So I think that it's something that it's really possible. Okay. Probably not today in the market that it's there at the moment, but it's something that it's theoretically possible to propose as an alternative.
Yeah. You also use the word agency. I think in your project you are definitely moving from this maybe China financed building industry with the specialized workers towards how the agency can be moved to the local. How actually are people dealing with it now already in Addis Ababa? Did you witness maybe types of construction that are already happening?
Yeah. Well, I would say that in the small scale there are some experiments taking place, but yeah, their impact is really small. Something that I can say is that people are interested in taking part also. No? This idea of centralized planning and action as opposed to the decentralized action of people. And many people say, I don't have a work, I have arms, I can participate to the construction of this city. Yeah. And it represents, of course, also a job opportunity and maybe this idea of also capacity building.
Henk, you also visited Addis Ababa in preparation for the Architectuur International event.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe a small coincidence with the fact that Antonio placed his project there, but maybe not. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what you encountered when you visited the city.
Yeah, well, we were there at the same time. We met each other. So, and it was also because of this reason that I think that for globally it is really a super important issue. How to densify the city without erasing the total structure. Not only the city fabric, but also the people who and the social structures of the people who live there. And I think that's it's a big challenge to find good solutions for that. And not only for Addis, but I think the project is an example also for other situations and how to implement the people themselves. Yeah. I mean, and then also the connection with the structure and the infill. I could very well imagine that is something that could also function. Because in Addis we saw neighborhoods where behind the buildings there were self-built structures in the gardens of the people, you know. So I could imagine that if you provide a framework, that could also be could help to help and also help the people to build their own infill with.
Absolutely.
Okay, and in general, this type of framework might have been built in concrete, and Job, you are proposing a timber support frame.
Yeah.
Did you actually study, because the theory you are using is maybe the ownership is of John H. Braken?
Yeah.
Did you study what kind of successes have been booked in history, architectural history, with that system?
With the wooden system.
Not only timber,
with open building.
Yeah.
I think there are many examples in history about open building neighborhoods as well, and at this moment also a lot. But I was really inspired by the neighborhood of Molenvliet by Frans van der Werf, one of the founders of the open building legacy.
Which city is it located?
Sorry?
In which city?
It's in Papendrecht, next
The
to
Netherlands.
yeah. And but that's really the first neighborhood which was completely built with the open building, so with the drager and the inbouw.
Yeah.
And I think it's really inspiring to see also in the movie from John H. Braken and Frans van der Werf how this is done. And it was really the start for my project to look forward from that vision and to see if we can give the current relevant subjects in society, for example, self-sufficiency or sustainability, connecting to that vision of H. Braken. Yeah.
And did you also look at the inhabitants of that neighborhood and how they have developed themselves?
At that time, it was also with Corona, so it was a little bit difficult.
It's a pity.
But I would like, if I could do it again, I would like to do that. But
Okay.
yeah.
You were limited in your possibilities.
Yes.
You weren't that limited. It's a sort of strange thing because Addis Ababa is of course not next door, but you went there for about 3 weeks, I understood.
Yes, 3 weeks.
So you took sufficient time to orient yourselves and look at the ways people are managing or coping, perhaps. What can you say about how the self-organizational capacities of people now actually are already, how you could build up towards maybe a fantastic project like you mentioned?
Yeah, I think that there are many, let's say, self-organizing structures. I think that, as many scholars already have pointed out, the indigenous organic evolution of Addis, it's quite a particular case in the sense that it has a history in which, indeed, the spatial agency of the dweller was so relevant that most of the city was created by the people. Yeah. So that people migrated there, and the neighborhoods that are called Sefer also associated with the idea of community. And in those it also exists what is called the Edir, which is an association which is created by the neighbors. It's something that comes from the rural world. So indeed, as we were saying before, something that would be erased by evicting people and demolishing these places is not only the built environment, but is these social structures that are really something that it's embedded in the way architecture it is. And when you go around, you see places that are very relevant to people, not because someone designed them as such, but because they simply happened by the way that people live. So I think that there's this strong bound and this collision between, let's say, the action of day-to-day activities and central planning, that it's a resource that should be considered in a planning of the city.
Yeah. And in a way, the society we have in the Netherlands and also other European countries is very much more planned than the type of society in Africa which you encountered. But I have the feeling also in a country like the Netherlands that the way housing is organized in all these systems is prohibiting people from expressing maybe their own wishes towards living and perhaps also co-housing.
I think so, yeah.
Is your plan... Did you think of that as a designer, how far to go with that? Because that's one of your main themes.
I thought, what if we don't design predefined housing types, but we keep an open structure and we let people themselves decide what the boundary of their dwellings will be, or what if they have space outside of a balcony or a garden, what if we let them choose? And what we need to do as architects to make sure that can happen. So for example, creating margins and zones, which it can be a building or could be an open space. And I think that's really important in that. Yeah.
And did any one of you, as a final question to both of you, talk already to a housing corporation, building company, architecture firm about your proposals? Antonio,
If we receive, I didn't understand.
Oh, did you already propose your project or the philosophy behind the project to actual building company or housing corporation? Or would you like to?
No, unfortunately, I didn't have this chance. It would be beautiful to be listened.
Yeah, but the whole project, the cooperation between the Technical University of Delft and the University of Addis Ababa, there is also the housing corporation of Addis is involved, the federal housing.
Yeah. I mean, this project is part of a framework of research, of a collaboration that exists, so it's actually informing, perhaps, what will happen. So, I mean, when they will build, they are using part of the research of this lab, the studios, to do, so somehow we'll see.
Yeah, the impact is not tomorrow, but maybe, after.
Yeah, maybe even indirect, that someone that will have this task will look at the plans also of students, the research that we did, that will be probably put online in the Addis Ababa Living Lab, and I don't know, we'll see what will happen.
Okay. Job, Housing Corporation in Amsterdam?
Yeah, I didn't meet them, I didn't talk to them, but I would really like that because I think that's really an opportunity to create inclusive and valuable neighborhoods, I think. Yeah. And I spoke to John Habraak himself about this plan, and that was also something which is really important for me. But that was really, really honored.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. And we have to conclude. Thank you very much, Antonio and Job. Yeah. Our third and final discussion, Designing for Nature, involves two designers that focused on large-scale planning, let's say, on also taking in concerns of our current energy transition and marine life. We'll learn about that later from Siga van den Berg, here next to me. But first, we'll kick off with David den Boer, with his plan with the beautiful name of Solarchipelago. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. So my project is called Solarchipelago, Designing Energy Transition in the IJmeer Along Ecosystem Change. And like Teun said, we are facing two crises basically in the Netherlands. One is an energy transition that we have to complete within a relatively short time, and the other one is ongoing urban development in this Anthropocene where biodiversity is continuously under pressure. So the premise for this thesis was to see if there's any ways where we can link an energy transition, this being an energy transition, with the way that ecosystems can transition. So exploring concepts such as succession in this sense. The question arises, can sustainable energy systems be an instigator for ecosystem restoration, and specifically the ecosystem at the IJmeer near Amsterdam, which is a very closed and hard and controlled freshwater lake that faces a lot of problems. I took a modular approach to this, where I designed several modules containing of willow wicker grids set in the waterbed of the IJmeer with PV panel fixtures on top. And these wicker grids are self-sedimenting, so they catch fine suspended sediment and create sheltered zones in the IJmeer, through which, basically at a certain moment vegetation takes over, partly obscure the solar panels, and a new module can be built next to it. So in this way, sustainable energy is pioneering before ecosystem restoration, creating more diversity in habitats and more gradients in the IJmeer, which provides habitats for a lot of different birds as well as aquatic life. Oh, it's going a bit fast. I have to wait a bit. I'm too impatient. And different variables in the willow-wicker grids allow for different variables in the marshes and ecosystems, along with different variables in the PV systems that are on top of the wicker grids, and together with a second type of module, which features solar trackers and breakwaters, they form these semi-permeable islands which filter the water from the suspended fine sediment and expand throughout time. And here you can see an impression of what this will look like. So at the same time, energy is produced, providing basically an instigator or a framework for new ecosystems, new habitats to emerge for different species. And because the modules multiply according to the rate of sedimentation and vegetation to come up, as well as according to the need for sustainable energy, multiple stages of succession are continuously present at the same time. So you get this long gradient in the IJmeer. I created a master plan for the IJmeer, which also links these islands with their breakwaters and wicker modules to urban developments of both Amsterdam and Almere, such as a metro causeway throughout the IJmeer and a possibility for an urban expansion outside Almere where these marshes can form the green structure. And in this way, the Solar Archipelago also provides recreational structure for Amsterdam and Almere all year round, and provides a way to create multifunctional land use not only in space but also time.
Great, thank you so much. Let's move directly on to Ziga. Your plan, I have it here in Dutch, het Doggersland, kraamkamer van de Noordzee.
Yes.
That's the title, or did you have an English name also?
It's actually a Dutch name, but
Dutch name.
yeah, it's a nursery of the North Sea, the Doggerland.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Take us through it, please.
Okay. I will. Indeed, Doggersland, kraamkamer van de Noordzee. My research question was, how can we use the energy transition as an opportunity to improve the ecosystem of the North Sea? So here you see the Dogger Bank in the middle of the North Sea, is a more shallow part of the North Sea. And I tried to design a wind farm from the perspective of the intrinsic values of the landscape and the marine life itself, from the scale from the wind turbine till the scale of the whole Dogger landscape. The North Sea has been exploited by fishing in the industry since the beginning of the 20th century, and this has resulted in an almost complete disappearance of the hard substrate, so hard material, oyster reefs. Well, this was actually the breeding ground of all the marine life. So the bottom of the North Sea is, yeah, you can now compare it to a barren desert. And the North Sea is also a location for the installation of wind turbines in order to achieve the wind to the climate goals. Here in this image you see the Dogger Bank is totally lightened up because of all the windmills. In 2050, around 15,000 wind turbines have been placed, or must have been placed in the North Sea, and 8,000 on the Dogger Bank. And this artificial hard substrate of the wind farm, if you design it in a clever way, it can really offer an opportunity to act as a reef on where a rich marine life is possible. But this requires a new approach of designing and developing wind farms. So first of all, we have to see the sea not anymore as a blank page, but it is a landscape. So 60% of the Netherlands is sea. So how well do we know the Netherlands actually if we don't know the sea that well? So in order, we have to get to know this landscape and also get to know its inhabitants. So who are they? With my research, I mapped the landscape and all the residents of the Dodger Bank. So who are they? What are they doing? What are their wishes? And what's their day like? One has very specific needs, and the other one feels at home everywhere. But for all the residents, hard substrate is really needed as solid ground under their feet. By studying the sea life and all these marine animals, I have been trying to identify their needs, and I translate them into a series of parameters that influence design of a wind farm on every skill level. So every choice, every design choice on all skill levels is stimulating the growth of a rich and diverse marine life. So here you see a few of them. I also designed a method for the making process of the windmill foundation, which can happen on a location itself. And this method can create really a wide range of windmill foundations. Every piece can be different, and the marine life will benefit from that. But this method is also benefit, it's leaving a new landscape behind, create new conditions that influence the ecosystem in a good way. So here you see a starting point of a typology to scale up this wind farm. But until now, there's not a lot of knowledge known in science about the specific requirements and wishes of these different animal species. So the starting point is how more diverse their habitat is, the bigger the biodiversity. So I propose a cycle of designing, constructing, and researching and adapting. So in this case, this new wind landscape is really an opportunity to get this, to get to know this landscape and its marine life a lot better. And when this energy transition is done, or the windmills are reaching their end life, there is a beginning of a new underwater landscape created. Really an underwater reserve, and this nursery can really benefit, is benefiting the whole North Sea to this ecosystem. Yeah, I think that's it.
Well, that's a beautiful image to close with, and very enticing. Same counts for your plan, David, which shows that something that might be very technical actually can result in a whole new type of habitat, if I'm not mistaken. When you are graduating, you can sort of develop your own design brief. That's the nice thing about graduating. Can you both please tell me how did you arrive at that sort of design brief for yourself? Maybe Ziga first?
Yes, before graduating I started a small research. I wrote a paper and I was researching our basic attitude towards nature. So who are we as humans and what's our relationship and how did that grow during time? And also in the relationship where we ended up now. So the conditions of our planet and our landscape, we all know this, the loss of biodiversity and the conditions of the sea. So we need a cultural change and we need to teach ourselves again to create more empathy and to get to know these other living creatures and to take them seriously and redefine our position as a human being.
And did you go to the Dogger Bank because you had the idea that that would be the ideal place to situate that new kind of attitude?
It was perfect to test a kind of new thinking because, yeah, you saw how big this energy transition is. Like a quarter or even more, 30% of the North Sea will be windmills. So we're kind of colonizing the sea with our human perspective. So therefore, yeah, can we create an attitude where we not only take from the landscape, but also bring? And it's actually benefiting for everyone if we do it in a right way.
David, you are maybe also paying into that idea that humans are colonizing, but also in a very sympathetic way are sort of turning the table. How would you say that in your case, not only marine life, but also bird life and human life will start to coexist in a more balanced way?
Well, when I started out analyzing the area, you think, similar to what Sika said, it's like a blank slate, like it's water. But underneath the water, there's all these things going on, and you see that within the metropolitan system of Amsterdam, with the closing of the Zuiderzee, creating the IJsselmeer and the Markermeer, we had a basically dramatic influence on the landscape there. So where we really sort of removed all dynamics and spontaneity with our obsession to control, which is a very Dutch approach to the landscape.
We basically
from the
killed
past.
the lake in a way.
Yeah, in a way, and I think we have to move also from that desire to control to looking at the way also ecosystems move. We also in the past we had this idea that ecosystem moves linear, so they move towards the sort of end stage, and now it's becoming more apparent that's not the case. Like there's constantly disturbances happening, constantly the unexpected, ecosystems then decay again, and then something new comes up. So I think that approach to both bird life and also people of the region is also based in this idea of experimentation, and let's put down some of those modules and see what happens, and maybe we can make an amazing island to it in the future that we can visit. Yeah, definitely.
When I see your images, it looks also quite technological in your way of thinking. Do you agree?
Not necessarily. Because basically most of the most technology is basically the internal part of the solar panel, I think, because everything else is quite low tech, and that also has to do with the way we relate to technology in these landscape systems. I don't think an amazing technological innovation could necessarily save us, because then you see that these interventions, they're quite low tech, but they require a sort of understanding of the system and of nature itself. So it's technology, but technology within the technology sort of nature relationship, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Ziga, in your, you're basically also creating new constructions with the wind turbines, obviously.
Yeah.
Did you consider how you would actually use materials and bring materials to that location, and what would be the impact on the environment in that sense?
Definitely, it's one actually of the also a parameter for the large scale, because underneath the seafloor there is a landscape which is a result from our last ice age, which really a rich diversity of all sediments. So by bringing this method over there, using this method, it creates a new topography of the seafloor. So in the beginning it looks like a very heavy intervention. On the scale of the North Sea, it's still nothing. But where you do it, you get this old glacial landscape to the top, and there yeah, it brings a lot of diversity, new diversity again, rich sediments where sea life can benefit from.
Is it almost a sort of archaeological way of working?
Also,
Yeah.
well, take into account the old riverbeds, and they are there, and what's still there, and how can we, with this knowledge, what can we do with it, and to create this, this goal of to create as much as diversity as possible. This is a part of it.
Considering these two projects, Henk, how did the jury react of the Architectuur Netherlands?
I don't tell anything about that because
you're going to keep it secret. Okay.
Next Saturday we will have the jury.
Then I will ask you your personal opinion of the take on how the energy transition might be used in a positive way.
Yeah, I think that's really for both projects. That's very intelligent combination of mechanisms that are different mechanisms. I mean, you use the reality of the wind farm to improve the sea life of the underwater landscape, and in fact you do more or less the same on a somewhat different way, but in fact that's the same mechanisms. And I had a feeling that that could be also a good trigger to make it real, you know? Why would not that company building the windmills improve the underwater landscape? Did you talk with them, or
yes.
do you?
Yes, we're busy with that. So together with the Embassy of the North Sea.
Can you explain maybe what that is?
The Embassy of the North Sea?
Yeah.
It started 2 years ago, and it's based on the ideas of Bruno Latour. And the goal is to make from the North Sea a public actor.
Yeah. With a certain agency.
With a certain
like
agency, exactly.
Yeah,
make it a political actor. And now we want to try to participate in a tender process. So we will join. And while joining, we will present radical ideas for wind farms. But as a starting point for this conversation with the people who build the wind farms, but with the government who is creating this set of rules where within this wind farm has to be built. So, looking forward to that. And let's see.
That sounds ambitious, but in a way also sort of logical if we start to realize the effects of the biodiversity crisis we are in. David, your project focuses more on how to integrate maybe the system of creating ecosystems or regenerating. Do you think there is a chance that you could educate many people through projects like yours to become more aware and to take action to prevent further loss of biodiversity?
Well, I think it can, in a way of also seeing these kind of interventions in the landscape as an investment. So there are a lot of worries right now about sort of these solar fields popping up in the Netherlands, and people don't want them to destroy the landscape. Or also floating PV has been a large topic, and then the vogelbescherming, they say we don't want this because it will probably harm the birds and the aquatic life. So really looking into ways that also projecting a bit and also keeping that sort of spirit of experimenting and seeing what happens can be a way in which you can show people, hey, if you actually use these technologies and these ideas, we can actually end up with an amazing new nature reserve for Amsterdam.
Yeah.
So I think that's also really the power of speculative design, that you can sort of show these dreams, these outcomes to people.
Yeah. And did you also
it can be something they want instead of just a simple solar field or.
Sure.
Yeah.
And did you also take maybe steps in the in the road to perhaps proposing your idea to to organizations like Zika did with the North Sea Embassy?
I proposed it to Deltares, which is very much looking into ways from learning from the Markerwadden, in part, and also with this growing sort of demand for more PV in the Netherlands, and can we put those things on water? And they were definitely, they were quite interested in the ways that sort of these two can really come together in a way, and maybe not simultaneously, also in a way, but also through time. So they, for them, it was also quite of a different mode of thinking for them from their sort of engineer-like vision.
Just to round off this discussion, and then we'll have a very short reflection with Henk. In the first discussion, we had Nicole, who called herself an eco-pragmatist. Did you think of your own relation, your own position towards ecosystems, and did you find a term like that that sort of fits your attitude, or are you still debating with yourself what your position is?
Maybe I want to steal the term of my colleague, landscape architect, an eco-optimist.
Eco-optimist.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And who is that colleague?
That is Thijs de Zeeuw.
Thijs de Zeeuw.
Thijs de Zeeuw. He's really a landscape architect who's designing for animals.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you, David?
I don't have a term ready. I'm not sure about the eco-pragmatist, but I do think for this thesis you really had to become kind of an ecologist as well.
Yeah.
Which was very interesting. But I also found out maybe a bit more after you're done, and you see sort of like what are the effects of this thesis, or speculating about what the effects will be. That you also have to be an activist as a designer, and also take note of politics and what goes around in that, because I think that's where designers can win a lot, and definitely in relation to biodiversity decline.
Well, that's a nice statement as well. Thank you both, and please stay at the table. I'm just going to draw some final conclusions with you, Henk, because your view is not so much from within the projects themselves, but also observing what is happening in the schools, in building practice. So I was just wondering how optimistic you are about the ideas and perhaps their implementation in, let's say, the course of the coming decades, because some of the plans are very long term, obviously.
Yeah, well, I think the basic pleasure of my job is that almost all participants of Architectuur are very optimistic, and they come with positive ideas, and they are also able to take you into their proposals and see the relevance of that. So I hope that that they will lit the light of a lot of other people and clients. So I'm really very optimistic, and I think this generation of this year is special because they make a lot of connections. I mean, they do not design a one-dimensional solution for a specific task, but they lay connections with other disciplines, but also very smart connections like you do with other developments. They connect the ecological quality with the technical development and the climate change and also the energy change. So I think that that's also a very important role of a designer, of course. I mean,
would it even be the central role of a designer to actually connect and integrate? Because there are not many other disciplines. David mentioned the discipline of ecology.
Yeah.
I think that is more defined, perhaps, than the role of the designer.
Yeah, I'm very glad to see that. And I think really that is very important because a lot of people look at architects like the dressing a building, make it look good. But of course, it's all about how our physical environment functions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think not only these two, but all 30, they are busy with that.
Yeah.
To make solutions for the improvement of the functioning of the society.
Yeah, yeah.
And facilitating it with three-dimensional designs.
That's right.
Very, very good.
Well, you already mentioned there are not only 6 promising young design talents showing their graduation projects through Architectuur, but 30.
Yeah.
They are all on show at the Nieuwe Instituut here in Rotterdam and also available on the Architectuur website. And if you'd like to visit the exhibition, you can go there until August, end of August, when and then it closes. But you can also buy the book of Architectuur published by NAI 010 publishers.
Sure.
So there is a lot of ways in which people can actually gain the knowledge. And how, if you were to give one last sort of outcry towards perhaps clients listening that think, that sounds like a good idea. I should get on the phone and call Antonio or Job or Ziga, and how should they go about it?
Yeah, I think that that's really important, and we as Architectuur try to bridge the gap between the designer and potential clients. But I think the most important thing is that every participant uses the fact that he or she participated in the Architectuur to develop their own track and their own career according to their specific ambitions.
Okay.
I think that's the most important thing that we can also help them with.
Yeah.
With the book, with the presentation.
So basically, you will be your own ambassador. That's what I. That's what I hear from you. But Henk is helping everyone who is talented and joins Architectuur along.
Yeah.
Last but not least, you already also mentioned it when I asked you about the jury decision. The winner of this year's Architectuur in the Netherlands will be announced very shortly. When is that award ceremony taking place?
Yeah, well, next Saturday, and because of the corona measures, we will have a live stream from the new institute, but of course we informed our participants all over the world to look at the award ceremony. It is next Saturday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time, because I hope that your colleagues in Chile will also join the...
They have to get up early.
Yeah. No, yeah, they have to get up
more or less.
3 o'clock.
Okay.
It will be different for those in India will already be sleeping.
Okay, well,
but nevertheless, I think 3 o'clock next Saturday.
Next Saturday, June the 19th.
Yeah, we have a YouTube channel, and on our website, www.architectuur.nl, you can find the link.
Beautiful. Okay, so we will have to conclude here, and I would like to thank, first of all, everyone for watching and staying with us. It has been a very interesting show, of course, with Henk van der Veen, also with Barbara Luns from AIR, but of course, and foremost, the 6 designers that joined us from all parts of the Netherlands today. And they are Nicole, Freek, Antonio, Job, Ziga, and David. Thank you very much. And all of you, best of luck also with your careers. That was all. Thank you.
Thanks.